The locksmith's voice trembled when he told me, "Ma'am, I think you should bring your daughters home.
Right now.
And don't come alone." I was standing beneath the high white ceilings of St. Matthew's Chapel in Savannah, Georgia, staring at the framed photograph of my husband, Michael Whitaker, smiling in a way I now realize I never fully understood. The memorial service had just ended. People were hugging me, whispering the same soft words about strength and time and healing. My black dress felt too tight across my ribs when my phone buzzed in my hand. I almost ignored it. Grief had numbed me to urgency. But something about the repeated vibration felt deliberate, like someone knocking from the other side of a locked door. The number was saved as contractor, office remodel. I stepped outside into the humid coastal air and answered. The man on the other end cleared his throat twice before speaking. "Mrs. Whitaker, this is Leon. We've run into something unexpected while removing the built-ins in your husband's study. I really need you here. And please bring your daughters." I asked him what he meant, but he wouldn't explain. He only repeated more quietly, "Don't come alone." Then the line went dead. Michael had been a maritime insurance attorney for nearly 30 years. Careful, respected, methodical. The kind of man who triple-checked locks before bed and filed documents in color-coded binders. We had raised 2 daughters, Claire and Madison, in the same colonial house near Forsyth Park for over 2 decades. I believed I knew every habit he had, every scar, every late-night work call. But there was one room I avoided since he passed 6 months ago, his study. The room where he collapsed from what doctors called a sudden aneurysm. I had finally gathered the courage to renovate it, to turn it into something brighter. A music room for my grandchildren someday. A space that didn't smell like leather and old paper and silence. And now a contractor was telling me to bring my children as if we were about to witness something that required witnesses. Claire arrived first at the house, still in her hospital scrubs, her dark hair pulled into a tight knot. Madison came minutes later from her marketing firm downtown, her heels clicking fast against the driveway stones. Neither of them liked drama. Both of them saw it immediately in my face. Leon was waiting inside, dust clinging to his jeans, his expression pale and strained. The study looked gutted. Bookshelves torn out. Walls partially stripped. But the far wall was wrong. Where Michael's law books once stood, there was an opening, a narrow, deliberate doorway built into the structure itself. Not damage, not accident, designed. "We found a seam behind the paneling," Leon said. "Too clean to be structural. So we opened it." He stepped aside. The hidden room was narrow but tall, climate-controlled, professionally built. Metal shelving lined each wall. Every shelf held identical black document boxes, each labeled with names and years in Michael's unmistakable handwriting. Claire whispered, "This looks like evidence storage." Madison reached for the nearest box and opened it. Inside were photographs.
Surveillance photographe.
A man entering a marina office. The same man exchanging envelopes in a parking lot. Printed bank transfers. Flight itineraries. Handwritten summaries detailing meetings, times, outcomes. I opened another box. More of the same. Different names. Different cities, Charleston, Jacksonville, Wilmington. Not legal case files. Not client paperwork. This was tracking, monitoring, building records on people. "Mom," Claire said quietly, her voice losing its clinical steadiness, "these aren't lawsuits. These are dossiers." At the back of the room, embedded into the wall, was a steel safe nearly invisible against the paint. Madison tried our anniversary code. Nothing. Claire tried Michael's birth year. Nothing. I stared at the boxes again. Michael never relied on random numbers. He relied on meaning. I stepped forward and typed the coordinates of the marina where we met, numbers he used in every password for decades. The keypad blinked green. The door opened. Inside were three objects placed carefully apart from each other: a leather journal, a sealed flash drive, and a passport. I picked up the passport first and felt the world shift beneath my feet. It was my husband's face staring back at me, but the name read Daniel Hale. "That's impossible," Madison whispered. But it wasn't. The photo was real. The expiration date current. Multiple entry stamps. Claire opened the journal. Every page was filled with Michael's handwriting, dates, sums of money, notes like paid, contained, risk resolved. Some entries ended with the word neutralized. There were no explanations of services rendered, just outcomes. Claire looked up at me slowly. Dad wasn't just monitoring these people. He was controlling something. I reached for the flash drive. It was labeled with a date from 15 years ago, the same year our house was broken into and nothing was stolen. At least that's what the police told us. My heart began to pound as I realized how many odd moments from our marriage I had dismissed as coincidence. Before we could say another word, Leon reappeared at the doorway, looking even more unsettled than before. "There's something else," he said. "About an hour before I called you, a man came by asking questions about permits. He went straight to this wall like he knew something was behind it." Silence settled thick in the air. Claire moved instinctively closer to me. Madison stepped toward the hallway, scanning like she was assessing risk in a boardroom. And then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I opened the message with shaking fingers. "You should have left the wall closed." My stomach turned cold. A second message followed seconds later. "Some rooms protect more than they hide." Claire read it over my shoulder. "Mom, whoever this is, they know." A knock came at the front door.
Slow.
Controlled. Not frantic. Not loud. Intentional. I felt something shift inside me then, not panic, but clarity. Michael had built this room knowing one day it might be opened. And whoever had just knocked likely knew that too. I stepped out of the hidden space and into the hallway, my daughters flanking me. Through the glass panel beside the door, I could see the silhouette of a man in a tailored gray suit. He stood perfectly still, as if confident time was on his side. Claire whispered, "Don't open it." But my hand was already reaching for the handle. Because in that moment, I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to consider before. My husband's death may not have been as natural as they told me. And if that was true, the past wasn't buried. It was standing on my porch. When I opened the door, the man standing on my porch did not look like a threat. He looked like someone who served on nonprofit boards and donated to restoration funds. Early 60s, silver hair combed neatly back, linen suit despite the Georgia heat, polite half-smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said smoothly, as if we had met before at a dinner party. "I apologize for the timing. I was hoping we could speak privately." Claire moved closer to my shoulder. Madison crossed her arms, her posture sharp and protective. "I did not invite him in." "You've already sent messages," I said evenly. His smile didn't flicker. "I was hoping we could avoid misunderstandings." Behind me, the house felt exposed, like skin without armor. He glanced past my shoulder toward the hallway that led to Michael's study. That was when I knew he wasn't guessing. He knew exactly what we had found. "Your husband was a complicated man," he continued, lowering his voice. "He involved himself in matters that did not concern him. I would hate for his curiosity to cause unnecessary strain for you and your daughters." Madison stepped forward. "That sounds like a threat." The man chuckled softly.
No.
"A warning. There are records in that room that were never meant to see daylight. If they surface, reputations collapse. Markets react.
People panic.
And when powerful people panic, collateral damage follows." He said it gently, like someone explaining weather patterns. I felt something steady harden inside my chest. My husband is dead, I replied. If there was damage to be done, it's already been done. For the first time, his eyes sharpened. On the contrary, Mrs. Whitaker, damage can echo. Then he handed me a plain envelope. You have 24 hours to reconsider what you intend to do with what you found. He stepped back, nodded once to my daughters as if concluding a business negotiation, and walked calmly down the porch steps to a dark sedan idling at the curb. The engine purred, then the car disappeared down the oak-lined street. Inside the envelope was a single photograph. Claire recognized it before I did. That's me, she said quietly. It was taken outside the hospital where she worked. Not recent, perhaps a week old. Madison turned it over. On the back were 3 words written in neat block letters. We see everything. The air in the house shifted. This was no longer about Michael's secrets alone. This was about leverage, about control. I called the police, but even as I spoke to the dispatcher, I knew how it would sound. A grieving widow, a strange hidden room, a polite man in a suit, a photograph. By the time an officer arrived, the car was long gone. He took a statement, promised to increase patrols, and suggested installing additional cameras. He did not step into the hidden room. He did not ask to see the files. When he left, Claire locked the door and turned to me. Dad wasn't collecting gossip, she said. He was collecting pressure points. Madison nodded slowly. Which means whoever that man is, he thinks those pressure points belong to him. I looked down the hallway toward the open wall. Michael had always told me that insurance law wasn't about risk. It was about prediction. You didn't wait for disaster. You anticipated it, prepared for it, controlled the outcome. And suddenly I understood. This room wasn't built to hide wrongdoing. It was built as a safeguard. We returned to the hidden space together, closing the door behind us. Claire began opening boxes systematically, scanning names. Some I recognized from Savannah's elite circles, developers, shipping executives, a state senator. Madison searched the journal for patterns. These aren't random, she said. Look at the dates. Every file spikes around a specific event: mergers, elections, property transfers. I leaned against the metal shelving, my mind racing. Michael attended countless charity galas, zoning meetings, maritime conferences. I always assumed he networked for clients. What if he had been mapping influence instead? Claire stopped abruptly. Mom, she whispered, handing me a file. Inside were documents tied to a waterfront redevelopment project from 12 years ago, the same project Michael publicly opposed. The same project that mysteriously collapsed after allegations of corruption surfaced. I remembered the stress of that year. The late nights. The anonymous calls that hung up when I answered. At the time, Michael told me it was just professional backlash. But the file in my hand contained photographs of private meetings, bank transfers routed through shell companies, and a handwritten note from my husband. If necessary, release to press. My breath caught. He hadn't just known about corruption. He had been ready to expose it. Madison's phone buzzed suddenly, making us all flinch. She looked down and went pale. My company's compliance department just emailed me. They're reviewing my recent contracts for ethical irregularities. Claire's jaw tightened. Mine too, she said quietly. The hospital board requested a meeting tomorrow morning. Anonymous complaint. I closed my eyes briefly. The man on the porch hadn't wasted time. He's testing us, Madison said. Seeing if we'll fold before he escalates.
Claire looked at me.
Dad must have anticipated retaliation. There has to be something else here, something bigger than these files. I turned back to the safe and stared at the empty interior. We had taken out the obvious contents. But Michael never relied on obvious alone. I ran my hand along the inside edges until my fingers brushed against a slight ridge near the back panel. Help me, I said. Claire fetched a screwdriver from Leon's discarded tools. We worked the panel loose, and behind it was a second flash drive taped flat against the steel. No label, no date, just hidden. We carried my laptop into the room and locked the door again. My hands trembled slightly as I inserted the drive. A single encrypted folder appeared on the screen titled, "If I'm Not There." Claire exhaled slowly. He knew. Madison glanced toward the window as if expecting the sedan to reappear. I clicked the folder. A video file opened. Michael filled the screen, sitting at his desk in the very room we now occupied, the shelves still intact behind him. He looked tired but focused, as if recording testimony. "Laura," he began, the sound of my name in his voice nearly breaking me. "If you're watching this, it means someone forced your hand." He paused, glancing briefly off camera. "I didn't build that room for power. I built it because I discovered something I couldn't ignore." He explained that years ago, while auditing maritime insurance claims, he uncovered a network of staged shipping accidents tied to real estate acquisitions along the coast. Fires, sinkings, insurance payouts that cleared land for redevelopment. "They call it controlled loss," he said bitterly. "Destroy something quietly so you can rebuild it profitably." He named no names, but he described a structure: businessmen, lobbyists, a fixer who handled intimidation. I gathered proof in case they ever crossed a line I couldn't contain. He leaned closer to the camera. "If you've found this, they've crossed it." My pulse roared in my ears. Claire whispered, "Dad was holding evidence against organized corporate crime." Madison's face hardened. On screen, Michael continued, "I tried to stay ahead of them, to negotiate without confrontation. But men who profit from destruction don't like being monitored." He swallowed once. "If anything happens to me that feels accelerated, assume it wasn't coincidence." The word hung heavy. Accelerated. I felt my stomach drop. His aneurysm had been sudden, unexpected, convenient. "There's one name you need," he said finally. "The man who coordinates the pressure. He doesn't appear on paper. He operates through donations and foundations. You've met him at least twice." My heart slammed. The screen cut to black before he said the name. The power in the room flickered. Just once. Then steadied. We stared at each other. "That wasn't random," Madison whispered. As if summoned by fear, a car engine slowed outside again. Claire moved toward the window cautiously. "It's the same sedan," she said. My chest tightened, but not with panic, with resolve. Michael had been trying to contain something corrosive. He had died before he could finish. And now the containment had broken. I looked at my daughters, strong, intelligent, furious, and understood that silence would not protect us. It would only invite further erosion. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years, an investigative journalist Michael once trusted during that waterfront scandal. If the man in the linen suit believed intimidation would make us bury the truth, he had misjudged the wrong family. Because whatever Michael had died protecting, it was no longer just his fight. It was ours. The journalist's name was Aaron Delaney, and he answered on the third ring with the cautious tone of someone who had learned to expect trouble before introductions. When I told him who I was, there was a long pause on the line, the kind filled with memory rather than confusion. "I wondered when someone would call me about Michael," he said quietly. That sentence alone told me more than weeks of silence ever could. We agreed to meet that evening at a crowded seafood restaurant along River Street, neutral ground, too public for intimidation, too loud for easy surveillance. Claire insisted on coming. Madison followed in her own car, checking her mirrors every few minutes as if she could will away the sedan that had already begun trailing us at a distance that felt deliberate rather than subtle. By the time we slid into a corner booth under dim hanging lights, I realized something important. Fear had sharpened me instead of weakening me. Every sound registered. Every glance lingered longer than it should. And when Aaron finally sat across from us, leather satchel at his side, I saw in his eyes that he understood exactly what kind of evening this was going to be. Aaron looked older than I remembered, thinner, grayer at the temples, but his gaze was alert. He listened without interrupting as I explained the hidden room, the files, the video message Michael recorded. When I mentioned the staged shipping accidents, he leaned back slowly. I knew pieces, he admitted, but I could never connect them without hard proof. Every time I got close, sources went silent, or suddenly decided to retract statements. Claire folded her hands tightly on the table. You think Dad fed you information? Aaron nodded. He leaked small fragments through intermediaries. Enough to stall developments. Never enough to burn the whole structure down. I swallowed. That sounded exactly like Michael, strategic, controlled. Why didn't he go public? Madison asked. Aaron's jaw tightened. Because public exposure triggers retaliation. Quiet leverage buys time. That word again. Leverage. It echoed like a fingerprint across everything we had discovered. I slid my phone across the table and played the last seconds of Michael's video, the moment before it cut to black. Aaron's face drained of color. He was about to say a name, he murmured. He knew he might not get the chance. Outside the restaurant window, headlights paused longer than traffic required. I didn't need to look closely to recognize the silhouette of the sedan. Aaron lowered his voice. There's a philanthropic consortium operating up and down the southeast coast. Disaster recovery investments, waterfront revitalization, infrastructure grants. On paper, they rebuild communities. In practice, they profit from catastrophe. Claire exhaled slowly. Controlled loss. Aaron nodded. Fires, sinkings, zoning shifts after, unexpected, structural damage. Insurance clears land. Investors swoop in. The public sees renewal. They don't see the ignition. My pulse hammered. Who runs it? I asked. Aaron hesitated. Officially, no one. It's a board. But there's a financier who coordinates donations and capital flow. He never signs anything personally. Always through shell foundations. My chest tightened as memory rearranged itself. Charity galas. Fundraisers. The linen suit. The polite smile. We met him, I whispered. He came to the house. Claire's head snapped toward me. Madison's hand tightened around her water glass. Aaron leaned in. If he came to you directly, that means he's worried. Men like that don't handle intimidation personally unless containment has failed. The word landed heavy. Containment. Michael's wall. The safe. The hidden drive. He hadn't just collected evidence. He had been holding back something corrosive, something dangerous enough that exposure threatened powerful networks. When we left the restaurant, the air along the river felt thick with storm humidity. The sedan followed again, no longer pretending coincidence. Madison swore under her breath as it mirrored every turn. Claire called the police this time, reading off the license plate aloud. The operator promised a patrol car would intercept, but the sedan vanished before sirens appeared. Back at the house, Aaron insisted on reviewing the second flash drive personally. We locked ourselves inside the study, the hidden room now stripped bare, shelves empty, but presence lingering. I replayed Michael's video from the beginning. Aaron paused at subtle details I had overlooked, a slight tremor in Michael's left hand, a shadow crossing the wall behind him near the end. He wasn't alone, Aaron said quietly. My stomach clenched. We rewound the final 10 seconds frame by frame. Just before the screen cut, Michael's eyes flicked to his right, not at the camera, but at someone standing off-screen. The cut hadn't been random. It had been interrupted. Claire's phone buzzed mid-analysis. Her expression hardened. The hospital board moved my review up. Tomorrow morning. Effective immediately. Madison's email chimed seconds later. Legal notice of suspension pending audit. They weren't just threatening anymore. They were dismantling our credibility piece by piece. Aaron closed the laptop gently. They're isolating you, he said. If they discredit your daughters, you hesitate. If you hesitate, you bury the evidence. I felt anger rise steady and cold. Michael anticipated retaliation. I replied, there must be something he left beyond this. I walked to the window, overlooking the backyard. The oak trees swayed lightly in the night breeze, branches scraping softly against the roof. That sound triggered a memory. Michael climbing into the attic space above the hallway years ago, saying every structure needed hidden reinforcement. I turned slowly. The attic, I said. Claire looked confused for a moment, then understanding dawned. Madison grabbed a flashlight without a word. The crawl space was cramped and hot, insulation brushing against our shoulders as we maneuvered carefully along wooden beams. Dust clung to our clothes, and the air smelled faintly of aged timber. Near the far corner, tucked beneath a support joist, was a small lockbox bolted directly into the frame of the house itself. Not easily removable, not visible unless someone knew exactly where to crawl. My throat tightened. Michael had hidden this not behind walls, but within the skeleton of our home. Claire handed me the flashlight while Madison pried the lock open with steady determination. Inside were paper documents sealed in plastic, a small voice recorder, and a manila envelope addressed simply, "If pressure escalates." My hands trembled as I opened it. The documents weren't copies of the dossiers downstairs. They were financial maps, flow charts linking Shell foundations to insurance payouts, then to redevelopment projects tied to one central philanthropic trust. And there, printed at the top of multiple forms, was a name I recognized instantly. Harrison Vale. The world narrowed around that name.
Harrison Vale.
Benefactor. Speaker at charity events. Donor to children's hospitals. The man in the linen suit. The one who had stood on my porch and warned me about echoes. Aaron let out a low breath. He's untouchable on paper, he said. Every accusation against him has evaporated for years. I felt something click into place with terrifying clarity. Michael hadn't died because he was reckless. He had died because he knew too much. The aneurysm. Accelerated. A convenient medical event that required no visible force. Claire whispered, "Mom, are we sure it was natural?" The question hung like smoke. I didn't answer, because the truth was already forming inside me, heavy and undeniable. If Vale believed Michael's death ended containment, he had miscalculated. Because Michael hadn't trusted the system alone. He had trusted me. Trusted that if the walls ever fell, I would not crumble with them. Below us, a floorboard creaked. Not from wind. Not from settling wood. From weight. Madison's eyes widened. Claire shut off the flashlight instinctively. We froze in darkness, hearts pounding in perfect sync. Another sound followed, the unmistakable scrape of the back door opening. Aaron whispered, barely audible, "They're inside." My breath steadied rather than quickened. This was escalation. Not intimidation. Not warning. Entry. And in that suffocating crawl space, pressed against the beams of the house Michael built our life in, I understood something with absolute certainty. The man who thrived on controlled loss had just made his first uncontrolled move. I tightened my grip on the flashlight and listened as footsteps moved slowly through the hallway below us, methodical, searching, and coming closer. The footsteps below us were deliberate, unhurried, the kind of movement that comes from someone who believes the outcome is already decided. I could hear the faint brush of fabric against the hallway wall, the subtle creak of wood under measured weight. Claire's breathing had gone shallow beside me in the dark crawl space, and Madison's hand found mine without hesitation, gripping tight but steady. Aaron leaned close enough for me to feel the warmth of his breath, near my ear. "We need to call this in," he whispered. But calling the police suddenly felt naive. Harrison Vale didn't make moves without layers. If someone was inside my house, they weren't acting independently. They were sent, either to retrieve the attic box or to ensure we never used it. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, something colder replaced fear. This was no longer a chess match played through emails and reputations. This was physical, immediate, and I was done reacting. The footsteps paused directly beneath us. A drawer slid open. Then another. Whoever it was had gone into the study. They were searching for something specific. I pictured the now empty hidden room, the stripped shelves, the safe removed. They were late. That realization gave me leverage I hadn't felt until that moment. I reached slowly into the lockbox and pulled out the small voice recorder Michael had left behind. I didn't know what was on it yet, but I knew one thing. If Vale believed the attic still held his greatest risk, he would prioritize it. That meant we had a narrow window to leave without confrontation. I mouthed to Claire and Madison, "Back window." The crawl space extended toward a small ventilation opening above the laundry room addition. Years ago, Michael installed a removable exterior panel for maintenance access. At the time, I thought it was excessive. Now I understood he had been building exits long before I knew we would need them. We moved slowly, carefully, crawling beam to beam until we reached the vent. Madison eased the panel loose, while Claire held the flashlight low against the insulation to avoid light spilling below. The house creaked again, louder this time, and I heard a muffled voice downstairs. Not loud enough to make out words, but enough to confirm there was more than one intruder. My pulse pounded, but my hands remained steady. One by one we slipped through the opening and dropped into the dark backyard, landing softly in damp grass. Aaron followed last, replacing the panel loosely behind him. We didn't run immediately. Running draws attention. Instead, we moved along the tree line toward the neighbor's property, keeping low until we reached the side street beyond the fence. Only then did Claire dial 911, her voice firm, controlled, reporting active intruders. Within minutes, distant sirens pierced the night. We stayed hidden behind a parked SUV until patrol cars flooded the block with blue and red light. From the end of the street, I watched officers enter my home with weapons drawn. 2 men were escorted out 10 minutes later in handcuffs. Neither was Harrison Vale. They looked like contractors at first glance. Neutral clothing, no obvious weapons, but their calm expressions betrayed training. One of them scanned the crowd gathering along the sidewalk as if searching for confirmation.
For me.
When his eyes passed over where I stood partially concealed, I saw no panic in them. Only calculation. That unsettled me more than aggression would have. These weren't desperate criminals. They were employees. Claire lowered her phone slowly. "This won't stop him," she said quietly. I nodded. Harrison Vale hadn't risked his own presence. He had tested our perimeter, measured response time, evaluated how much we truly had, and now he knew we possessed something worth breaking into a house for. Back inside later that night, after statements were given and officers finally cleared the scene, the house felt altered permanently. Not violated, exposed. The illusion of safety had dissolved, leaving only structure and choice. Aaron placed the attic documents across the dining table, studying them under better light. The financial maps were damning on their own, but without direct attribution, they were still circumstantial. "The recorder," Claire said softly. I held it in my palm, hesitating for the briefest moment. Whatever Michael had captured might removed out entirely, but it would also confirm the full scale of danger. I pressed play. At first there was only static, then the faint clink of glassware and distant music. A gala. Voices overlapped in polite conversation until one became clear. Michael's voice.
Calm.
Measured. "Harrison," he said. At what point does redevelopment stop being opportunity and start being orchestration? A low chuckle followed, unmistakable now that I listened for it.
Vale.
Careful, Michael, he replied smoothly. Ambition sounds ugly when recorded out of context. My breath caught. The audio sharpened as Michael continued. 3 fires in under 18 months tied to properties later acquired by your trust. Insurance payouts routed through subsidiaries connected to your foundation. That's not coincidence. Silence stretched for a moment, then Vale's tone shifted, no longer amused. You mistake vision for violence. Michael didn't back down. I mistake nothing. And if anything happens to my family, everything I have goes public. The recording ended abruptly. The room was silent except for the ticking of the kitchen clock. Claire's jaw was set tight. Madison's eyes were glassy, but focused. Aaron leaned back slowly. That's not suspicion, he said. That's confrontation. I closed my eyes briefly. Michael hadn't been negotiating. He had drawn a line. And Vale had responded by accelerating the timeline. The aneurysm, the suddenness, the lack of prior symptoms. A seed of certainty settled into me. This had never been about controlling narrative alone. It had been about eliminating resistance. Claire broke the silence first. We release it. Madison nodded. All of it. Aaron looked at me. Once it's public, there's no containment anymore. The backlash will be loud. Legal teams, counter-accusations, smear campaigns. I met his gaze steadily. He already started the smear campaigns, I said. He broke into my house. He followed my daughters. Silence hasn't protected us. The decision felt less like bravery and more like inevitability. By morning, Aaron had contacted 2 national outlets willing to review the material simultaneously. If one hesitated, the other would move. Claire gathered her employment records to preemptively counter allegations. Madison contacted a corporate attorney friend she trusted implicitly. We were no longer isolated. We were coordinated. Around noon, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. I answered without hesitation. Laura. Harrison Vale's voice flowed smoothly through the speaker. This escalation is unnecessary. I walked to the front window, watching reporters begin to gather at the edge of the property. News traveled fast when money was involved. You enter my home. I replied evenly. You threaten my children.
A faint sigh.
You misunderstand precaution for hostility. I almost laughed. No, I said quietly. I understand controlled loss. And you just lost control. There was a long pause on the line. For the first time since this began, I heard something beneath his composure strain. You'll destroy more than me, he said. Entire developments will collapse. Investors will panic. I watched a news van pull up across the street. Maybe, I replied. But fires don't get to call themselves renewal anymore. Then I ended the call. The story broke before sunset.
Audio clips aired.
Financial diagrams flashed across screens. Harrison Vale's foundation released a denial within the hour, but denial sounded thinner when paired with evidence. By evening, federal investigators announced a preliminary inquiry into redevelopment-linked insurance claims across 3 states. Claire received an email rescinding her suspension pending review. Madison's firm issued a statement clarifying her name had been used fraudulently in anonymous submissions. The machine that had moved so confidently against us began to stutter under scrutiny. It wasn't justice yet, but it was fracture. And fracture was enough. That night, I walked alone into what used to be Michael's study. The hidden wall had been rebuilt after the police investigation, sealed permanently. The shelves were gone. The safe removed. The space felt ordinary now, almost disappointingly so. I ran my hand across the smooth paint where secrets once stood in perfect rows. Michael had believed in leverage as protection. He had believed he could contain destruction by holding evidence quietly. But containment requires perpetual vigilance. And vigilance costs life. I wished he had trusted the world sooner. I wished he had trusted me sooner. Yet standing there, I also understood him. Love makes architects out of ordinary people. We build structures around those we fear losing. In the weeks that followed, subpoenas were issued. More whistleblowers surfaced. Controlled losses became headline language rather than whispered theory. Harrison Vale resigned from his foundation pending investigation. Whether prison would follow, I didn't know yet. But the myth of untouchability had cracked, and sometimes that crack is where real change begins. Claire returned to the hospital stronger than before. Madison's firm offered her a promotion for withstanding reputational pressure with transparency. As for me, I chose not to sell the house. I chose not to move away from the street where intimidation once parked confidently. Instead, I renovated the study into something filled with windows and light, no hidden compartments, no reinforced walls. A room without secrets. Michael had tried to shield me from a world that profits from destruction. In the end, it wasn't shielding that saved us. It was exposure. And I learned something I will carry for the rest of my life. Power thrives in quiet corners, but it weakens in daylight. I am not the widow who nearly folded under intimidation. I am the woman who walked through her own attic in the dark and chose to step into the light instead. Harrison Vale believed catastrophe could be engineered and contained. He was wrong about one thing: some losses cannot be controlled once truth decides to burn.